Hi there. Today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the equipment we use in blood bank, some of the reagents we use in blood bank, and why we use what we use. So we're going to talk about some of the equipment first, and the first thing we're going to talk about is our lighted agglutination viewer. If you notice, we've got this concave mirror on the viewer, and it's got a light switches here on the side. Whenever we're reading reactions, we are going to read the reactions in the viewer. When we're looking at them, you're always going to be looking at the mirror. You're never going to be looking through the glass, but at the actual button in the mirror. This is a magnified, and then the light. It's going to help you look at the button as it comes off. Is it going to come off in swirls, or is it going to come off in chunks? What's going to happen with the button? The other thing it's going to help us with is we're going to be nice and close to it. I do not want to see anybody reaching all the way across the counter to look in the mirror. This mirror should be right at the edge of the counter, and you should be right up against it because you want to get the best look at how that button's coming off and what it looks like as we're shaking the button off. Well, I've got one here. Let's talk about the tubes. In blood bank, we use the 12x75 tubes. We use these tubes because it's the best size for concentrating the cells at the bottom of the tube, as well as when we go to shake it off, it spreads it out enough up the side that we can actually see what kind of reaction we're getting. These tubes fit in the Cerofuge, but the Cerofuge is actually built to fit these tubes. We do not choose these tubes because it is what fit in the Cerofuge. We picked these tubes because of what I had said, the button at the bottom and the dispersing along the side while we're looking. So let's move over here to the Cerofuge. This is the Cerofuge that we use in blood bank. This is one we use in our lab. Every labs are a little bit different. The on-off switch is over here on the side. So you're gonna make sure it's turned on, and you're gonna push the open button. It's gonna open the top. You can see on the inside, we've got the tube holders. This comes off, which is very helpful when we get to the point where we're washing lots and lots of tubes, because you can pull this off and dump over your dump bucket the whole amount. So the tubes stay in there, we dump it. When we're doing washes, you give it that nice little shake. So we'll talk more about that in a little while. See how it's got the little lines there, and at the bottom you got the little tabs. So when you're putting this on, you want to make sure it turns all the way. If you don't get it all the way in there, the center's going to spin, but this is just going to sit and you're not going to get a good spin. On the front, we've got these that are set to Cero 1, 500 Gs for 20 seconds, Cero 2, 1000 Gs for 130 seconds. I'm not sure what the 1D6 is. I'll have to look at that. So Cero 1 is what we use for our saline time. So Cero 1 is what we use for saline and for Coombs time. Cero 2 is what we use for our washes when we get to the washes. Your lab manuals all talk about this, but just so you're aware, 1 is saline and Coombs, 2 is wash. In our lab, we use a dump bucket. We don't have sinks at every station. We don't have automatic cell washers. So at the dump bucket, when you first come in, you're gonna put some disinfectant on the bottom of your bucket. So as you're dumping all these cells, they're hitting the disinfectant. At the end of the lab, I want you to wash that out and make sure to wipe out the bottom. Otherwise, what happens is the bottom gets all stained with the red hemoglobin. It actually starts turning brown. It gets kind of gross and dirty looking. So that's gonna be your dump bucket. Over on this side, we've got our cardboard containers. In the cardboard containers, we can put all pipettes, we can put all tubes. Do not put paper into the cardboard container. There is no need for any of the papers, unless it's pourable, drippable, or flakeable, to go into the containers. The containers, we really want to be focused on putting just our tubes and our pipettes. Every station has a bottle of saline for washing. So you have a bottle of saline. When you need to refill this, there's a box of saline across the room, and the teacher will show you where that's at to refill. We have our heat blocks. When we're going to be using the heat blocks, we're using them a little bit later in the semester, where we're going to be using them for antibody IDs, screens, things like that. Our bibs, which we have laying out, soft side up Plastic side to the bottom. If we spill something, this will absorb it. If I have plastic side up, if we spill it, it'll just keep running. So soft side up in front of you. If your bib gets really, really gross, change it out during the labs. That's fine. You can keep little notes on your bibs, things like that. So it's always a good idea to have them handy. We also have our orange BioSquares. Whenever you open up tubes, use the orange BioSquare to pop the top off. One, it helps keep the aerosols down. The new tubes, we don't have as much of an issue with aerosols as we used to, but it's still good to do. And then the tube lid sits on the clean BioSquare. And then the sticks that we'll be using off and on throughout the semester. The last thing I want to talk about is our reagent racks. Everybody has 2 racks. The first one is going to be our Anticeras. Racks are set up this way in our lab, and they're always to stay set up in this way. If you rearrange the racks, it could potentially put somebody at risk if they get the wrong thing. Every time you grab a reagent, even though I knew this blue is going to be anti-A, you're still going to look at it to verify it's your anti-A. You're going to pick it up, give it a little shake, and use it. So in our racks, in our Anticera racks, we have anti-A and anti-B, and then anti-AB. We use AB in our lab regularly. Out in the clinical world, some sites don't use it. Use your clinical facilities procedure manuals when you get there, but we use it in our lab. Then we have our anti-D, and then our gamma clone control. This is our D control. Pretty much, this is Anticera without the sera. This is all the other things that could cause potential false positives without the actual antibodies. So we use this anytime we need to run a control. That's what we're going to use. Then in the back, we have our PEG. And then next to it is our anti-IgG C3D. So it's our polyclonal AHG. This rack should always be set up like this. This is one of those built-in quality assurance things where if you always set things up the right way, the same way, there's less chance for mistakes. This rack is our cell rack. Again, it's always set up the same. We start in the front with our A1 and our B cells. When you get these cells and are ready to use them, we're going to gently mix them this way. When we're mixing them this way, you'll see that we kind of like, it helps get them in suspension without ruining your cells. So once you get them in suspension, these have been sitting for almost a week without being used, but once you get them in suspension, you want to make sure, see how this still has the cells on the bottom? You want to make sure that all those cells are off the bottom before you use anything. So there they are. Next time I grab the cell, I'll just be able to do this a couple times and those cells will go off the bottom. So in the front, like I said, I have my A1 cells and my B cells for my reverse typing. In the back, Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, and Roman numeral 3. Those are my screening cells. We'll get to those in a couple weeks when we do screening cells. And then over here, I have my check cells, which we'll talk about later also, but they're always off to the side. So our A and B in front, 1, 2, and 3 in the back, and check cells off to the side. Whenever you pull these out, they should be in this order. When you put them back in the fridge, they should all still be in this order. Other things that are particular to blood bank, these racks. These racks, when you're in our lab, 1 rack per patient. That way we know we don't mix our patients up. There are, if you count across, 12 spots. A lot of our racks don't have a full 12. There's a reason there are 12. We'll get to the point where 1 patient fills this whole amount. So these are our blood bank racks. Sometimes you might have 2 or 3 patients, so you may have 2 or 3 of these sitting out. If you do at that point, you can just kind of leave the rack sit on the paperwork and you remember whose patients are whose. And of course, we're always going to have our tubes labeled, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. That's it for the major supplies in the blood bank. If you have any questions, please reach out to your instructor.